Gubernatorial debate. We are the first debate to take place and appreciate all the campaigns and candidates and all of you for being here. I'm Wendy Hunt, President and CEO of the Greater Nashua Chamber of Commerce, and it's my pleasure to welcome the business community and leaders and the citizens at this event. Today, I am pleased the Greater Nashua Chamber is hosting the 3 gubernatorial candidates who will be appearing on the ballot November 5th. In advance, if you all could please silence your phones, that would be great. And before we begin, I invite you to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'd like to thank today's sponsors. First, thank you very much to the Event Center for hosting us today and their staff who not only was here late yesterday afternoon, but early this morning as well. Special thanks as well to George Russell for being here from Nashua Public Television Channel 6. Thank you to the program sponsor of today's gubernatorial event, Oracle, and especially Eric Carlson for always supporting the Chamber and our mission. And I would finally like to thank our presenting sponsor, Eversource. Please join me in welcoming Mike Licata, Director of Government Affairs for Eversource, to the podium.
Good morning. I'm Michael Licata, and on behalf of Eversource, we're honored to sponsor this first gubernatorial debate of the general election. I would first like to thank Wendy Hunt and her amazing team at the Greater Nashua Chamber of Commerce for organizing this great event. I also want to thank Mayor Craig, Senator Ayotte, and Mr. Villee for participating in this debate. In New Hampshire, we pride ourselves on our commitment to democracy and being informed voters. That can only occur when candidates for office agree to meet with voters and exchange their views at events like this. So thank you, Senator Ayotte, Mayor Craig, and Mr. Villee for your respect for the democratic process and your commitment to the retail politics our great state is known for. Thank you very much.
Good morning. I'm Carol Baldwin, Board Chair of the Greater Nashua Chamber of Commerce. It is my honor to introduce Phil Kincaid, who will be moderating today's event. Phil has over 45 years' experience as a leader in New Hampshire journalism. Phil was a reporter and editor at Foster's Daily for 31 years, arriving in 1979 just in time to help cover the 1980 presidential primary. Phil served in several roles at Foster's, including State House reporter, political editor, and editorial page editor. He left Foster's in 2010 as the managing editor for online news and content. A familiar face to many of you at today's event, he then served as the executive editor of the Nashua Telegraph until 2015, when he retired from daily journalism. For 5 years after that, Phil was the executive director of the New Hampshire Press Association until 2022, and he recently stepped down from being a project editor for the Granite State News Collaborative. Please join me in welcoming Phil Kincaid.
Good morning, all. It is my pleasure to be here to host this morning's gubernatorial debate hosted by the Greater New Hampshire Chamber of Commerce. And I especially want to thank Wendy, wherever she went, for inviting me to be a participant in this. It is always an honor to be part of the democratic process. And I think all of us who have been around New Hampshire politics understand and appreciate what a well-reasoned and reasonable state New Hampshire is when it comes to politics. And this is another example of that. November 5th is Election Day. It's an important day, and not just because all the ads and the flyers will be gone. It's because New Hampshire voters will be selecting a brand new governor. The 3 candidates who will be on the ballot next month are with us this morning. Republican Kelly Ayotte, who served as United States Senator from New Hampshire from 2011 to 2017, and also as New Hampshire Attorney General from 2004 to 2009. And Democrat Joyce Craig, who served as the mayor of New Hampshire's largest city, Manchester, for 3 terms from 2017 to 2023. And Libertarian candidate Stephen Villee, a software developer and one of the earliest free state participants. Today we are going to talk about issues that are of particular concern to the business community. All panel questions were written by the Chamber's Advocacy Committee, and they will be presented by our panelists here. Let me introduce them to you. First, we have Marlise Werbel, CEO of the Front Door Agency, Dr. Amir Tuzi, Dean of Business and Security Studies at Riviera University, and Stephen Chase, President of SL Chase Steel. Now, I would like to invite the candidates to join me on stage. Please welcome Kelly, Joyce, and Stephen. I'm not going to read their bios. They are in your programs. That way we can jump right into the heart of the program. The order of the candidates is alphabetical, and we will rotate through the questions in that way. Each candidate will answer all of the questions and will have 60 seconds to respond. A rebuttal time of 30 seconds per candidate will be allowed after each question. At the conclusion of today's event, each candidate will have 2 minutes for closing remarks. The timer will be held up in the front row. There it is right there. So please keep your eye on the clock, and I will remind the candidates when their time has expired. After the panelists have presented all of their questions, if time allows, we will take audience questions. We are looking forward to an informative conversation today, and of course, your courtesy and respect of the candidates is appreciated throughout the program. We ask you to please hold your applause until the end of each candidate's answer so as not to cut into their allotted time. So let's get on to why we're here. Let's hear from the candidates. Question number 1 concerns the state's budget and will be asked by panelist Dr. Amir Tuzi. Answering first will be Senator Ayotte.
Thank you. One of your first tasks as governor will be to craft the next biennium budget. Given the predictions of falling revenues, how will you balance the needs of New Hampshire citizens? What cuts will you make? What steps will you take to increase revenue?
Everyone for being here today and the Nashua Chamber for hosting this. In terms of the budget, first of all, I think it's really important that we live within our means. And we are going to have to look across state government and look to see how we can do things better. I think we can leverage technology better in many ways to make government more effective, more transparent. But the last thing we're going to do in a challenging budget environment is to increase taxes. So as I look at where we are, and I will say that Mayor Craig every year in office proposed a tax increase. That's not how we're going to balance the budget in New Hampshire. And we're also going to look, as we look at our priorities, of protecting those who are most vulnerable. That's where we have to start and build from there. But I do think that if we live within our means and we're protecting those who are the most vulnerable, we look for better ways to do government. And also if there's areas where we're putting resources in, but we don't need to do it anymore, we will take care of that and make sure that we're having a responsible budget. Because right now people are facing inflation and we can't pass on the cost to taxpayers.
And now, next is Mayor Craig.
Well, good morning, and I want to thank the Nashua Chamber for hosting and all of you for being here. You know, this election is all about trust. I first got involved in public service when I ran for school board. I wanted to help students in the city of Manchester, and that's exactly why I'm running for governor, to ensure we're strengthening our local communities and creating opportunities for residents across our state. As mayor of Manchester, I'm the only candidate in this race who has actually put forward a budget, a $400 million budget that balanced the needs of our community, focusing on public safety, quality public education, and infrastructure. You know, my budget put more police officers on the street than ever before in the history of Manchester. And as a result, we saw a decrease in violent crime of 40%. I also brought in historic money from the federal government, over $100 million, that brought in thousands of good jobs and made an impact in terms of investing in infrastructure. That's the same approach that I will bring to the governor's office.
Next, Mr. Villee.
Good morning. I have a very short veto list, but one of them is any tax increase, any income tax, any sales tax, any new taxes. So I'm going to stand firm on that. It's going to be challenging to balance the budget. There may have to be some cuts, but I'm going to be working with people who are familiar with the budget. I'm thinking specifically the McGuires, who are very familiar with the budget. I'll be consulting with them on how to craft a budget that's balanced.
Okay, we now have up to 30 seconds for rebuttal, beginning with Senator Ayotte.
Well, you know, we just heard from Mayor Craig that the budgets that she put forward in Manchester, every single one of them had a tax increase. We can't afford that at the state level if we want to protect the New Hampshire advantage. And that's really critical in this race, and I think it's a big difference between us and how we would actually balance the budget. Also, when I had the privilege of serving as a senator, I brought people together. We will work in a bipartisan way to make sure that we have a responsible, balanced budget for New Hampshire. That's what I did as a senator, and I'll do that as governor.
Mayor Craig?
Thank you. What's very clear to me is Senator Ayotte doesn't understand what's happening within the state and within our local communities. What's happening right now is the state of New Hampshire is downshifting millions of dollars onto our local community because they are not adequately funding pension. They're not adequately funding education. And then that means that our local property taxes increase. It's one of the reasons why I am running for governor, to stop this downshifting to our local communities. And I will add, I am opposed to a sales or an income tax and would veto anything that came to my desk.
And Mr. Villee?
No rebuttal from
Okay, now we move on to question number 2, which deals with major challenges in the state that are impacting workforce. It concerns childcare and will be asked by Steve Chase.
Thank you. Lack of accessible, affordable childcare is profound in New Hampshire and impacts employers' ability to hire an adequate workforce. What steps will you as governor take to help mitigate the lack of affordable childcare?
And this, we begin with Mayor Craig.
The question, and this is a major issue as I travel around the state that I hear from families and businesses. As a mother of 3, I encountered these challenges 25 years ago as well. And I understand that there's a lot of red tape at the state level that we can take care of to make this easier. What I'm hearing from child care centers is that when they have a potential employee and they have to send that application to the state, that it takes so much time to get the information back on background that that employee has already found another job. That needs to change. And then I'm also hearing from residents who are applying for the scholarship for childcare that 50% of those applicants aren't even getting through because the process is so tough. We need to make this easy to get employees, to get the employers, and to get individuals who can access the scholarships, the money they need so their kids can get into childcare. And we also need to make sure we're doing everything we can to make sure we're training individuals in our state to go into this industry. And there are great models within
Mayor
the state
Craig,
that we
your
can
time is up.
move forward with public-private partnerships.
And next, Mr. Villee.
The libertarian view, of course, is that government shouldn't be involved in this, so I wouldn't be pushing for any assistance with child care. But I also believe it shouldn't be about what the governor wants. It should be about what the people want, as expressed through their elected legislators. So if the legislator wants to push through some kind of initiative to help with assisting child care, if they can get it through the House and the Senate, I'll sign it, as long as it doesn't involve a tax increase.
Senator Ayotte?
This is a challenging issue for our state along with housing. And it's also a workforce issue as we think about working moms. I mean, I had both my children while I was Attorney General, so I understand this challenge. When we look at childcare, I agree with Mayor Craig that we need to make it much more efficient through HHS in terms of how we're administering things like the Child Care Scholarship. The state expanded eligibility for that scholarship over the last biennium, and that's helped a lot more families, so we should always continue to look at that eligibility, but make sure those dollars are going out quickly. And also, there were federal dollars that took too long to get out. So let's be better, let's be more efficient. But in addition to that, let's make sure that we establish those public-private partnerships. A lot of employers want to make it easier for them to actually marry childcare with their businesses, so let's make sure that we can do that on a regulatory basis while protecting children. Also other models, like recently I visited the Boys and Girls Club, and they're adding childcare too. So how can we support those types of efforts in New Hampshire?
Seconds for rebuttal, beginning with Mayor Craig.
Well, thank you. I will just add that the CHIPS and Science Act has funding for childcare, and as governor, I will go after that funding for our local communities. And also as mayor, I work to bring $44 million of Build Back Better regional grant funding to Manchester to build out infrastructure, workforce development, and it's bringing 7,000 new jobs to our state. That also includes funding for childcare. So I have done this work. I understand the challenges at the local level and intend to work hard for our local communities as governor.
Mr. Villee?
No rebuttal from me.
Senator Ayotte?
I would just add this. We need to elevate the profession of childcare as well. So using our community colleges and our university system to leverage education and training. The state's trying to do some more of that, but we have this great university system and community college, so making sure that those programs are there to, whether it's management of childcare businesses, and also increasing the flexibility for childcare, as I talked about at the Nashua Boys and Girls Club, but also for home childcare, so long as we're protecting child safety. That's always going to be at the forefront.
And now we move on to question number 3, which will be asked, which involves New Hampshire's housing crisis, and will be presented by panelist Maurice Werbel.
Thank you. 2 recent news articles report that New Hampshire has experienced the second highest spike, 76%, in median home prices in the nation over the last 5 years, coming in at over $530,000. In addition, New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority's latest rental cost survey reports that the average 2-bedroom apartment has increased 36% in the past 5 years, with the average rent in Nashua now over $2,300 a month. These trends are obviously at odds with supporting the needs of the state workforce and the ability to attract and retain talent. While there has been positive steps taken by the legislature on housing policy in recent years, more bolder actions are needed. As governor, what actions would you take to help our workers in New Hampshire realize their dream of home ownership or find rental housing that they can afford?
And the questions begin with Mr. Villee.
Yes. This past year, there was a bill called the Homnibus Bill, which tried to address this. One of the provisions I liked was putting a cap on lot sizes for homes that don't have access to sewers, making it no more than what is required by the Department of Environmental Services. That sounded like a really good idea to me. I know it's challenging to find some compromise that the towns and the cities can accept. I'm not so fond of tax credits, because I know that if you give somebody a tax credit, then somebody else just has to pay more. But I do want to reduce unnecessary lot size requirements. So that's what I would focus on.
Next up, Senator Ayotte.
There's both a state and a local role in this. First of all, at the state level, unfortunately, the approval process right now is not efficient. If you want to build anything, you've got to get approval from DOT, DES, Fish and Game, multiple agencies. We're going to overhaul that process and use a lean manufacturing. Those of you that are in the private sector, figure out where the barriers are, make it a 60-day process, transparent so people can get answers. The state needs to model good behavior there, and then the local decision-making is important in New Hampshire. I respect that. But really, as governor, I'm going to bring everyone to the table. We're going to get the state officials, the local officials, and the private sector to figure out how we can all work together to build more housing. The state can offer infrastructure support for communities on roads, on sewer, on water, if they're willing to build more workforce housing. The state also owns a number of properties. We're going to review all of what the state owns and say, are they in their best use right now? I already know some opportunities within the state that we could put those properties out for municipalities or the private sector and build more housing.
Next, Mayor Craig.
Sure. Projections from our state are that we need 60,000 housing units by 2030, so this is a critical issue for our state. I am the only candidate in this race that has put forward a comprehensive plan to address the housing crisis. It includes things like providing technical assistance for our cities and towns when they're addressing their zoning ordinances, and helping them with infrastructure, with water and sewer, whether it's state funding or federal funding, which is available. As mayor of Manchester, I made progress on this issue, and today we have over 2,000 units, homes, apartments in development. So I understand what needs to happen to get this done. While I think it's important to note, Kelly Ayotte has been sitting on the largest landlord corporate board making millions of dollars. This corporation has been jacking up rents and pushing people out of their homes. I have been on the front line helping people get homes, while she has been doing what she needs to do to benefit herself. We cannot trust Kelly Ayotte.
Now it's on to the rebuttal, starting out with Mr. Villee.
No rebuttal from me.
That moves on to Senator Ayotte.
Let's just make clear, she's referring to Blackstone. They own two hotels and one student housing complex in Durham, so they're not affecting the markets here in New Hampshire. But this is the problem with Mayor Craig. She always attacks the private sector. We need the private sector at the table. One example is she has an ad up right now attacking my work with BAE Systems, our largest manufacturing employer. I want the private sector at the table. We're going to work together to build more housing, and I know how to partner with them and make sure that we're all working together on behalf of this great state.
Here's another example where we can't trust what Kelly Ayotte said. I actually worked with Governor Sununu in the Manchester Chamber to bring BAE Systems to Manchester. And the fact is, she has been making millions of dollars sitting on a corporate board for a corporation that has been jacking up rents and pushing people out of their homes, not helping people find homes in a time when our state and our country is facing a housing crisis.
The format does not allow it this time, I'm sorry. We're on to question number 4, and it concerns education and will be asked by Dr. Endor Tuzzi.
Businesses and employees look for a quality education system when choosing a place to locate. There is current controversy about the state's obligation in funding education regarding how taxpayer dollars are allocated and the state's role on oversight of various education choices, such as traditional public schools, charter schools, education freedom accounts, where parents choose homeschooling or private school placement. What is your position on the state responsibility in funding and oversight of education?
Well, first, Senator Ayotte.
Well, I'm married to a middle school math teacher now, so I hear all the time, my husband, that's what he's doing now. I hear all the time about how our kids are behind in math. And so I'm a product of the Nashua Public Schools. My husband Joe is as well. We graduated from Nashua High. We need to elevate both math, science, reading, those fundamentals in our schools. And it comes down to the teachers So supporting what the teachers do and not the bureaucracy. I do believe that for some children, the public schools aren't working, and the education freedom accounts have allowed parents to put their child in the best venue for their child to succeed. We want every child to succeed in this state. And so as governor, I'm certainly going to be supporting our public schools. We'll be supporting opportunities for all children to succeed. We need to up our standards, support our teachers, but by the way, the state continues to spend more on education. We have to do things differently because we're not getting the results that we need for the children of this state.
Next up, Mayor Craig.
Sure, as I mentioned earlier, I first got involved in public service when I ran for school board. I know that quality public education leads to thriving communities and creates opportunities for our kids and their future. And I will mention that my daughter Sarah is now in her 3rd year teaching English at Hillside Middle School in Manchester. And I know how hard it is right now for our educators. And as governor, I will support our teachers, their students, and their families. The state is not adequately funding public education. And when I'm governor, I will ensure that our public tax dollars go toward our public schools. And I will also ensure that we have an education commissioner who understands and appreciates public education. On day 1, I will be asking for Frank Edelblu's resignation. We need a governor and an education commissioner who will be lifting up our public schools. It is not right that today it depends on where a family lives for the quality of education that they receive. When I'm governor, no matter where a student lives, they'll have access to quality public education.
And Mr. Villee?
The libertarian view is very different. Long term, I would like to see public schools no longer be publicly funded. Long term, I would like to see Article 83 of the Constitution amended to clarify that it is not a positive right to an education. But I know that's, of course, very unpopular. And again, I think it's not what the governor wants. It should be what the people want. So if legislators put forth proposals regarding education, as long as they don't involve a tax increase, I'll sign it.
Okay, now we're on to the rebuttal portion, beginning with Senator Ayotte.
During her tenure as mayor, at the end of Joyce Craig's tenure, they did an assessment of the Manchester Public Schools. They were significantly behind in math, in science, and reading. They were ranked as some of the worst schools in the state. I'm raising this because if our public schools, when they're failing children, we should give parents the opportunity to make sure that their children are in the right venue so that they can succeed. And we also, though, should uplift those public schools. The standards should be higher. The teachers definitely should be supported. It shouldn't be about the bureaucracy in those public schools.
When I took office, our public schools were struggling. And I will tell you, after the 6 years that I've been in office, we are now seeing an improvement in student achievement. We've done things like decreased class sizes, improved professional development for our educators, put curriculum in place that didn't exist before. We have set the foundation for students to come into our Manchester Public School and receive quality public education. And what you're seeing right now is a state that is not funding public education, so many of the schools are not able to provide the education for students that's necessary. But when we do fund those public schools, we will be able to.
Rebuttal from me.
Okay, now we move on to question number 5, and it's going to involve energy, and it's going to be asked by Steve Chase.
Thank you. The war in Ukraine and inflationary pressures have impacted New England's energy markets. Earlier this year, Merrimack Station in Bow, the last operating coal plant in New England, announced it will close in 2028. As older power plants retire, what will you do as governor to keep costs down for Granite Staters and support the development of new energy resources?
And we begin with Mayor Craig.
Thank you. We are seeing the highest energy costs in the state of New Hampshire. We have some of the highest in the country. So we do need to act, and we need to act with urgency. I'm the only candidate in this race that has a comprehensive plan to address this energy crisis. But I'll start by saying, as mayor, I took climate change and rising energy costs seriously. And at the time, we built the largest municipal solar array. And I will recognize that Nashua now has the largest municipal solar array, so congratulations. But because of that solar array and other initiatives that we put in place in Manchester, we were able to cut carbon emissions by 60%. So leadership matters, and we should be doing this in communities across our state. My plan focuses on decreasing costs for our residents and our businesses, diversifying our energy sources, and making sure we are doing everything we can to protect this amazing environment that our state provides to us. I'll also add that we need to cut the red tape and get funding out for EV charging stations and get those built. And as I advocated for with Mayor Donchis for 6 years, I will advocate for passenger rail to come to Nashua and Manchester.
Mr. Villee.
Yes, we have a nuclear power plant in Seabrook, and as I understand it, there is an opportunity to have one more in the same, I believe it's in the same location. I would certainly like to pursue that. Nuclear energy strikes me as being a nice, clean way to generate plenty of energy. In fact, we could be supplying energy to other states through nuclear energy. Other than that, I have no specific proposals.
It's on to rebuttal time. Oh, I'm sorry, Senator Ayotte. I apologize. I'm sorry.
Energy is really important as we think about housing, childcare, energy. In terms of the growth of our state and workforce, we need more energy, period. All of the above when it comes to energy in New Hampshire. So not only positioning ourselves, whether we grow natural gas opportunities, but also renewables of all forms. Whether it's hydro or whether we're looking at solar, that's important. But I also want to make sure that we look ahead and have a vision for New Hampshire about future technologies. Whether it's hydrogen or small modular nuclear, the decisions we make now on a regulatory basis will decide, can we be an early adopter of those energy sources, or will we be late to that game? And can you imagine a small modular reactor? We could have one in Nashua, we could have one in Berlin. The technology is much safer. The profile, we can produce our own energy. It's carbon neutral. So I want to think outside the box. The one thing we don't want to do, though, is become like Massachusetts. We don't want to add mandates that drive up costs. Ratepayers are going to be my #1 concern.
Okay, so now it's time for rebuttal. And we begin with Mayor Craig.
I'll just add a few more points for my energy efficiency plan, right? It focuses on increasing opportunities when it comes to solar, taking advantage of the opportunity we have with offshore wind, not only for the energy, but for the jobs that it will bring to our state. You know, we have some of the worst energy efficiency programs in the country, in New Hampshire, and we need to make those better so people are making the investment so they save money in the long term. Rebate programs as well. We have a tremendous opportunity to do more and do better and save residents and businesses money.
From me.
Okay, I will not cheat you out of your rebuttal time, Senator.
I love rebuttal time. There you go. I would just say, when it comes to energy, I know that Mayor Craig just cited the offshore wind project. It has to be a New Hampshire solution that works for our state. Of course, we want more energy of all forms, but our fishermen feel that that's going to destroy our fisheries. So that New Hampshire interest always has to be there at the table when we look at every project for New Hampshire.
And we're now on to question number 6, which deals with health care and will be asked by panelist Maria Zwerbel.
Another challenge that impacts families and employers is access to quality health care in terms of cost, wait time, and availability of providers. Mental health and substance use disorder in particular has impacted and is clogging up our emergency rooms. What will you do as governor to address these critical issues?
We begin with Mr. Villee.
Once again, the libertarian view is that government shouldn't be involved in this. So I have no specific plans here, but again, if legislature wants to push through something to improve health care, I will sign it as long as it doesn't involve a tax increase. That's it.
Next, Senator Ayotte.
I believe we need more transparency in healthcare. So for providers, so people can know, especially unfortunately if you have a high deductible plan. Also, excuse me, we also need to make sure that legislature just pass some rules on prior authorization in terms of insurance companies getting back and really making sure that people can get answers there. But when it comes to mental health, we've had a real issue in this state, and we need to strengthen our mental health system. Solution Health is adding 144 beds for those who are in acute need, because we've had people waiting in emergency rooms, which is not right for the state. But overall, we need more mental health providers. So as governor, I'm going to leverage our community college and university system. We need to have programs in those systems to train mental health providers of all forms. I think we should offer scholarships. We should offer loan forgiveness. If you're willing to work in New Hampshire for 4 or 5 years as a mental health professional, that is how we're going to help build our workforce, because that will improve all of our quality of life. Mental health impacts everyone. We're seeing it in our schools. We're seeing it with our friends and neighbors, and we need to improve our system.
We need to do everything we can to decrease healthcare costs and ensure that residents across our state have access to quality healthcare. That starts with decreasing prescription drug costs and making Medicaid expansion permanent. One of the biggest challenges that we have is ensuring that we can attract and retain medical professionals in our state. And I will tell you what is not helping is the extreme threats on reproductive freedom that we see in New Hampshire right now. And Kelly Ayotte has spent her entire career attacking reproductive health care. She has voted multiple times for a national abortion ban. She's voted to defund Planned Parenthood. She shepherded Neil Gorsuch through the Supreme Court process, and she celebrated when Roe v. Wade was overturned. She is trying to say anything she can to get away from her record. We need to make sure that we are doing everything we can to increase healthcare opportunities and reproductive healthcare in our state. We cannot trust Kelly Ayotte when it comes to this subject.
And Mr. Villee, it's your turn for a rebuttal.
I'll just point out that one of the things on my, speaking of abortion, one of the things on my very short veto list is I will veto any abortion ban that does not include an exception for rape, at least in the first trimester, or at any time to protect the health of the mother, or the life of the mother. So that's all I have to say.
Senator Ayotte.
Mayor Craig has misled women in this state. My position has been clear. I support our current law on abortion that gives women the freedom to obtain an abortion up to 6 months of pregnancy. And if, God forbid, in the last 3 months you have a medical emergency or your baby suffers from a fatal fetal anomaly, you can still get an abortion. I'll veto anything that comes to my desk that is more restrictive when it comes to women's rights. In the United States Senate, I fought for more access to mammograms, over-the-counter contraception for women, supporting preventative care. I work with Senator Shaheen when it came to protecting women against discrimination when they were pregnant, when a Supreme Court decision came down. So I'll work in a bipartisan way to make sure that women receive preventative health care in this state, and then I will protect our current law.
Now it's Mayor Craig.
Here's a case where actions speak louder than words. The fact is, Senator Ayotte voted multiple times for a national abortion ban. She voted 4 times to defund Planned Parenthood. She shepherded Neil Gorsuch through the Supreme Court process and celebrated when Roe v. Wade was overturned. We cannot trust her to make sure that women in our state have access to reproductive health care. I am the only candidate in this race who will protect and expand reproductive health care in New Hampshire.
A little bit ahead of schedule, which means we're going to have time for questions from the audience. I have a couple here. If there's anyone else who would like to write it down on the card that's in front of you and then hold your hand up, and I think someone will come around and pick it up and bring it to me. So we're going to continue the rotation as we started out. And I have a question from the audience. The rules are the same, 60 seconds to answer, 30 to respond. Do you support censorship of social media during pandemics? Senator Ayotte.
No, I don't support censorship. I believe in the First Amendment. So I'm not sure what the question is getting at, but no.
Mayor Craig.
I would say no as well. I don't.
I think this may be the one thing we all three agree on. No, I do not support censorship at any time.
Is there a need for rebuttal? The next question is, do you support lockdowns or vaccine mandates? Mayor Craig.
So I think it is important to always make sure that public safety and public health is at the forefront. And I will work with the experts within the state, as I did in the city during the pandemic, to ensure we're doing everything we can to keep our communities, residents, and businesses safe.
Mr. Villee.
I'm happy to listen to scientists as long as they, as Cole Porter said, do what all good scientists do, experiment. Yes, I want to see your experiments, and a computer model does not count as an experiment. I want to see the raw data from your experiments, and don't tell us that we're not smart enough to understand them. Don't tell us that that we need to just trust you. And if the data shows what I think it's going to show, then what you're getting from me as governor, if we have another pandemic, is a response similar to that of Sweden, focused care on those most in need, but no general lockdown and no mask mandate.
Of course, I always think it's important to listen to public health officials, but also we should learn the lessons from the pandemic that we just had. I really appreciated the way that Governor Sununu every day was on TV communicating with people and being transparent. It's always important to be transparent when you have a situation like that. But we also see that some of the suffering that our schools have had because of the school shutdown and issues like that. So we have to make sure we keep people safe, but also think about the consequences as well when we're shutting schools down and kids are losing learning. So take the lessons from this past pandemic, do the right thing, be transparent with people, of course listen to public health officials, but make sure that we think about all the consequences of the decisions that are made.
Is there anyone who would like to rebut? Okay, the next question is, describe the litmus test you use to decide what is a state responsibility versus a responsibility of New Hampshire's cities and towns. And I believe it's up to Mr. Villee.
I don't know that I could, the way it is now, I'll just live with it, and I don't think I want to change the way it is now, but I don't know that I could describe it. But it's fine as it is. The separation there is fine.
Senator Ayotte.
I think there always should be the balance that we have in New Hampshire with the local decision making and also the state role, but that local decision making is important to have the voice of communities at the table on issues. And one thing I know as governor, when you think about the legislature in the last biennium, they looked for ways, for example, in the rooms and meals tax, to return dollars locally. So if we live within our means, we'll always be looking for ways to return dollars locally. But I also hope those local officials would then return those to taxpayers who need property tax relief and other issues. That's not happening as much as it should. But again, I think the balance, that state and local balance is important, and we need to work well together and communicate, and especially as we think about issues like housing, how we can collaborate together to build more housing.
Is there anybody who would like to rebut? Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
There's definitely a partnership that has to be between a state and a local community, and we can do better on that, especially when we're addressing statewide challenges when it comes to education, when it comes to housing, when it comes to homelessness, substance use disorder, and the list goes on. And I can tell you that a town or a city will never be able to solve these challenges on their own. We need better collaboration and working together from the state level to support our local communities. And I'll give you an example. The state has the Doorway program that is supposed to provide services for individuals who are dealing with homelessness or substance use disorder. The Doorway in Manchester is located next to probation and parole and is not used often. We've been telling the state this for years, but they continue to sign the same contract and pay the same amount of money. So understanding what's happening at the local level provides incredible insight as to how we can do things better and support individuals at the local community, and that's what I intend to do as governor.
Rebuttal.
I would just add, I also think that it's really important that we work together. You know, Mayor Craig actually decided that it was better to write a letter to the governor to challenge him on the issue of homelessness rather than work together. My approach is going to be that we're not going to play politics. We're not going to be publicly challenging local officials if we disagree with them. I'm going to call them. We're going to get at the table with them. We're going to work together because in order to make this state better, it's not about calling each other out. It's about being bipartisan. It's about working together. I was one of the most bipartisan senators, and I know how to do that. I will do that in Concord.
I'd like to respond.
Yes.
So the letter that Senator Ayotte is responding to is a letter that every mayor in New Hampshire penned, Democrats, Independents, and Republicans in 2020, because we were not getting any support from the state. And so we worked together to make sure that we were getting the support from the state, and they put together a commission to address homelessness. But unfortunately, very little has come of that. So it is unfortunate that all of the mayors, again, Democrats, Independents, and Republicans, had to get together and write this letter. But we did it because we were always advocating for what was best at the local level.
And by the way, not every mayor signed on because they didn't think it was the right approach. They wanted to get at the table with the governor. Let's all work together instead of calling each other out publicly.
In 2020, every mayor signs the letter.
Okay, we're now on to the next question from the audience. I think the rotation is back to begin with Senator Ayotte. How do you plan on preparing New Hampshire to support the influx of non-English speaking people coming into the state? Senator?
Well, first of all, I think that, let me just say up front, I don't think we should go the way of Massachusetts that has spent almost $1 billion housing illegal immigrants, so we should not be a sanctuary state. That's really a difference between me and Mayor Craig. I would support a statewide ban on sanctuary cities. For those who are coming here as refugees, it's important. I wish the federal government were more transparent about that, so communities could really accommodate and understand who's coming, how do we work with them, how do we make sure we already have a housing challenge, we already have childcare challenges, and so that communication with the federal government on local issues is critical. So I would make sure that I'm advocating so that we know who's coming, work with local communities, but again, we're not going to have policies like we see over in Massachusetts that are spending money on housing illegal immigrants. We have money we need to spend on housing people here and our veterans.
Mayor Craig.
I'm a fourth-generation resident of New Hampshire, and I'm running for governor to make my state a better place for residents across our entire state. New Hampshire currently is not a sanctuary state, and it will not be a sanctuary state when I'm governor. This is another example where you cannot trust what Kelly Ayotte is saying. As I worked closely with the International Institute when they were resettling individuals in our community. My daughter now is teaching English as a second language to students. I understand the challenges that are happening at the local level and will support families as they move to New Hampshire. We are a welcoming place. We have to be welcoming for all. But I just want to be clear, because she continues to say it, New Hampshire is not, and it will not be a sanctuary. New Hampshire is not a sanctuary state, and it will not be a sanctuary state when I am governor.
Mr. Villee.
I think the original question was just about people legally immigrating but do not speak English. To that, I would say English is our standard language. It's not the state's responsibility to provide other languages, make it available to you. But since illegal immigration has been brought up, my own feeling is voters need to be citizens, okay, and they also need to be residents of the place where they're voting. I'm in favor of strong controls to make sure of that. And if an immigrant is found to have a violent criminal history, that is grounds for deportation. So those two things, fine. Other than that, I don't much care about illegal immigration. So that's all I have to say about that.
Senator Ayotte, would you like to rebut?
Yeah, I would just say, first of all, legal immigration is an important part of our country, and we can all trace our roots somewhere else. So supporting legal immigrants that are here, working with them to learn English, to be successful, to be part of New Hampshire, that's really important. But when Mayor Craig said we're not a sanctuary state, she actually went up and in the legislature, and there was a bill to basically create a ban to make sure that we never become a sanctuary state, that no locality passes those regulations. And she opposed that bill. So that's where the record is, and our state shouldn't go the way of Massachusetts. Of course, she's being supported by the governor of Massachusetts, so you wonder what the model is that she supports for our state.
Thank you. The bill that Senator Ayotte is referring to is a bill that I was with my police chief there supporting, because I will always do whatever I need to do to make sure our communities are safe. Kelly Ayotte, again, is saying anything to get elected. We cannot trust what she is saying. I have always supported our community members and making sure that they have an opportunity to succeed, and that's exactly what I will do as governor.
One more question from we might have time for one or two more questions from the audience. Regarding the fall in drug overdoses in Manchester, what have been the causes and what more can be done? Mayor Craig. Yes, regarding the fall in drug overdoses in Manchester, what have been the causes and what more can be done?
So, in the time that I was mayor over the 6 years, we saw a 20% decrease in opioid overdoses. There was a lot of work that happened, and we brought a lot of community members together, our nonprofits, our businesses. We hired an expert in overdose prevention. We did outreach to individuals. We put forward the first harm reduction strategy, a comprehensive plan to address harm reduction in our city. And so we did a lot of work to make sure we were helping individuals. But there's so much more work that has to happen. And more work has to happen at the state level in supporting our local communities. And that's what I look forward to doing as governor. We know right now the housing crisis is serious. Our shelters are full. We really need to focus on supportive housing in New Hampshire, because evidence shows when you can put a roof over someone's head, you can stabilize them and then better address their underlying challenges. And that's something that I'm focused on as governor.
My view as a libertarian is that prohibition is a failed strategy. We're in the fourth wave now of the opioid crisis. The first wave was back in the 90s, so we've been at it for 30 plus years. It hasn't worked. I would rather focus on harm reduction, and just to clarify what I view that to mean, things like safe injection sites and needle exchange and medically assisted treatment. So that's what I would like to focus on. I see that there is a New Hampshire Harm Reduction Coalition. I don't know much about it, but I'd like to get in touch with them, and if I'm elected, and see what we can do together. But again, I think that's probably there's not a lot I can do because of the federal government's focus on this failed strategy of prohibition.
Senator Ayotte.
Well, this is a really critical issue. In the U.S. Senate, I had the opportunity to work across the aisle on one of the most significant pieces of federal legislation called the Comprehensive Addiction and Recovery Act that focused on prevention, treatment, and recovery and getting those resources to states. So it took us a year and a half, but we got that passed. But again, the Doorways program, making sure that the programs that are in place, that they're achieving their goals, that we're really helping people get into recovery, most of all. And then prevention. Yesterday I was at the Nashua Rotary, and I had someone bring up to me who was working in prevention, really getting ahead of this, having those communication up front. I think we need to put more resources into prevention. Finally, the fentanyl dealers, we're not being tough enough on them in New Hampshire. That poison, I talked to the number 2 at DEA, used to be they were afraid to traffic their poison into New Hampshire. We need much tougher penalties. Unfortunately, recently in Concord, the Democrats said we won't have mandatories for those top-level fentanyl dealers. We have to be tougher on them.
Okay, time for rebuttal. Mayor Craig.
I think it's important to note that when Senator Ayotte was an AG, she refused to prosecute Purdue Pharma, and then she took money from the Sackler family for her campaigns. We have a significant opioid crisis, not only in our state, but in our country. And we need someone who has been on the front lines dealing with this crisis, helping people every day, which is what I have done as mayor. And that's exactly what I will do as governor.
No rebuttals.
Yes, as Attorney General, I was pushing for the prescription monitoring program when our state was late to the game. We went after methamphetamine. I work with the Drug Task Force. I have 5 law enforcement agencies supporting me in this campaign because they know how much I care about these issues and keeping our state safe. And in the U.S. Senate, I worked across the aisle on these issues to pass one of the most major pieces of legislation. I worked across the aisle also on making sure that we weren't overprescribing and did everything that we could. As a former Attorney General, this issue will be at the top of my list. And also, having met so many families in our state that are suffering, that I work with in the U.S. Senate, that will continue to focus on this issue.
Your time has expired. Okay, we have run out of time for questions. It's now into our closing statements. Each candidate will have 2 minutes. And we begin with Senator Ayotte.
Good morning. I want to thank the Nashua Chamber for having me here today. This is a very important election for New Hampshire, and I think you've heard this morning that there are fundamental differences in what we see for the future of this state between myself and Joyce Craig. I believe the last 8 years under Governor Sununu have been tremendous. New Hampshire is meeting top metrics in so many areas. We're the #1 state when it comes to return on taxpayer investment. We are the #1 state on child well-being. We are the #1 state on public safety, opportunity, personal and economic freedom. We have the lowest tax burden in the nation. We have the lowest poverty rate in the nation. The Sununu path is working. It's working for businesses. It's working for individuals. It's working for the people of this state. I'm going to keep us on that path. And we're going to keep New Hampshire moving in the right direction to make sure that our state remains safe, prosperous, and free. Mayor Craig would like to take us in a very different direction. She thinks that the Massachusetts model is a better model for New Hampshire. I couldn't disagree more. As mayor, Mayor Craig proposed a tax increase every year in office. She overrode the tax cap. She failed that city. Recently, I had a meeting of downtown business owners in Manchester. This is how they described her leadership: inaccessible, not responsive, not focused enough on public safety. Mark my words, if Joyce Craig makes it to that corner office in Concord, we can kiss the New Hampshire advantage goodbye. I'm not only going to protect our New Hampshire advantage, we're going to strengthen it. We're going to work together to fix our housing crisis. We're going to strengthen our mental health system. We will support our teachers and continue to improve our education system. New Hampshire is a beacon for the region and the nation, and I will work with all of you to make sure New Hampshire is even stronger. Thank you for having me today.
Mayor Craig.
Thank you. I want to thank the Nashua Chamber for hosting and for all of you for being here. You know, we live in a state that is brimming with potential. And I'm running for governor to ensure we're strengthening our local communities and making sure that every resident in our state has the opportunity to succeed. There is a lot on the line this election. Too many families and communities are being left behind. I am the only candidate that has the executive experience, that understands what's happening at the local level, and who has a track record of getting things done. So as your governor, I will make sure that we are building those 60,000 homes and apartments and condos that are needed so that our young people, our seniors, and our hardworking families can afford to live here. I will strengthen our public education and make sure public schools are funded and that we have an education commissioner who understands and appreciates public education. As I did as mayor, I will ensure our communities are safe and that our police officers have the resources and supports they need to keep families safe across our state. We will tackle climate change and decrease energy costs for families and businesses. And I'll work with the business community and the college and university system, as I did with winning the Build Back Better Regional Challenge that led to Manchester and Nashua being a tech hub. It's a game changer for our state, and I will always protect reproductive freedom in New Hampshire. Not only protect, but expand reproductive access. You heard a lot today, and I will just underscore that you cannot trust what Kelly Ayotte is saying. She is saying anything to be elected. Look at her record before you vote. I just went through everything that I am looking forward to providing to you as residents and businesses in this state. And I want to say that we will do all of that without a sales or an income tax. Thank you. I ask for your vote on November 5th.
Mr. Villee, bring us home.
Good morning. I'm Stephen Villee, and I'm a libertarian. I have a long-term view. It's not just about 2024. I have a vision for a much smaller government, a classical liberal government, winding down and eventually eliminating welfare programs, relying on the free market and voluntary charity. Now, I'm aware that for most of you, all of that sounds terrifying. But this year, I hope to show you that at least 4% of New Hampshire shares this vision. In fact, about 3% of the whole country wants this. I like to compare the libertarian community with the gay community. We're both a small minority, and we both want something really badly that the majority considers repugnant. But when libertarians hear that a candidate for New Hampshire governor is pushing for this classical liberal government, I think many of them are going to want to move to New Hampshire to make this vision a reality. But we need to convey a very important message. Just like the gay community, we're not trying to impose what we want, in this case small government, on you. We only want it for ourselves. And to that end, I'm looking at grandfathering you into the big government benefits you have now. There's so much more to say. Please check out my website, villee4nh.com. I cover a number of subjects there, including years from now, when we have enough libertarians here, the possibility of a U.S. constitutional amendment to allow negotiated, peaceful secession of New Hampshire from the United States, modeled after Brexit, so that we can be free of federal income tax. And I want to maintain the same excellent relations with the United States that Monaco has with France. If that sounds good to you, please vote for me on November 5th. Thank you.
Senator Ayotte, Mayor Craig, Mr. Villee, thank you very much for participating. Again, another example of New Hampshire politics at its best. You are free to go. Thank you. And I'd like to bring back Wendy for some closing remarks.
I called them back because I need a picture. Well, how about the Greater Nashua Chamber being on time finishing an event? Am I right? Thank you to our candidates. I have a few quick thank yous. Obviously, Phil, could not have done this without you. You're wonderful. Thank you to Chuck Mattia in the back, who is our timer extraordinaire and retired from the chamber. Thank you so much. Thank you to our panelists. Again, have a great day. Get out and vote, and thank you all for joining us today.